January 2026. 5 years after Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stood before cameras and promised a city that would revolutionize human civilization, the truth finally emerged. The line would not house 9 million residents in a mirrored metropolis stretching 170 kilometers across the desert. The line would not feature flying taxis, robot servants, or artificial moons. The line would become a data center, a server farm, a warehouse for computers, cooled by Red Sea water, humming quietly in the desert where a civilization was supposed to rise. The Financial Times broke the story on January 26, 2026. After a year-long strategic review, Saudi Arabia was preparing to dramatically downscale and redesign NEOM's centerpiece project, the futuristic linear city. Once imagined as a 170-kilometer wall of mirrored glass rising 500 meters into the sky, would be reimagined as something far more modest. An industrial hub focused on artificial intelligence infrastructure. An insider quoted by the Financial Times explained the logic with brutal simplicity. Data centers need water cooling, and this is right on the coast. That was it. The vision that consumed $50 billion, displaced indigenous communities, attracted global attention, and promised to redefine urban existence had been reduced to a single practical consideration: proximity to seawater for cooling servers. The glossy renderings of vertical forests and sky gardens dissolved into racks of humming machines. This is the story of how the most ambitious city ever proposed became the most expensive pivot in history. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It began in November 2024, when longtime NEOM CEO Nadmi Al-Nassour abruptly departed. His exit came amid mounting problems: construction delays, budget explosions, and a damning Wall Street Journal investigation that found evidence of deliberate financial manipulation by project managers. Al-Nassour's replacement, Iman Al-Madaifer, inherited a project in crisis. The numbers told a devastating story. Original budget, $500 billion. Revised internal estimate by 2022, $4.5 trillion. Final leaked estimate, $8.8 trillion. That's $8.8 trillion. More than the GDP of every country on Earth, except the United States and China. More than the combined economic output of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. For a single construction project, Al-Madaifer did what his predecessor could not or would not do. He ordered a comprehensive strategic review. External consultants were brought in. Every component of NEOM was examined. The question was no longer, how do we build this? But what can we actually build? The review lasted 12 months. Its conclusions, leaked to the Financial Times in January 2026, represented a fundamental repudiation of everything the line was supposed to be. The 170-kilometer linear city would be radically scaled back. The original vision of 9 million residents would be abandoned. The mirrored walls stretching to the horizon would never rise. Instead, NEOM would pivot toward becoming a hub for data centers and artificial intelligence infrastructure. The coastal location that was supposed to provide residents with Red Sea views would instead provide something more, immediately valuable: unlimited seawater for cooling the massive server farms that power AI systems. The kingdom that promised to build the future had decided the future looked less like a revolutionary city and more like a really big computer room. The pivot to data centers is not irrational. In fact, it might be the first practical decision made about NEOM since the project began. Data centers have specific requirements that NEOM's location can actually satisfy. Cooling water. Data centers generate enormous heat. The servers that power AI systems, cloud computing, and digital infrastructure require constant cooling. NEOM sits on the Red Sea coast, providing unlimited access to seawater for cooling purposes. No desalination required, no water scarcity issues. Just pump, cool return. Cheap energy. Saudi Arabia has abundant solar resources. The same desert sun that made the line's thermal calculations impossible makes solar power generation highly efficient. Data centers can run on renewable energy, aligning with Saudi Arabia's stated sustainability goals, without the impossible engineering of a climate-controlled linear city. Land availability. Data centers require space, but not the complex infrastructure of a residential city. No schools, hospitals, parks, or public transportation needed. Just buildings, power lines, and internet cables. Neom has plenty of empty land. Strategic positioning. Saudi Arabia wants to become a player in artificial intelligence. Data centers are the physical infrastructure of AI. Building them domestically reduces dependence on foreign providers and positions the kingdom in a growing industry. The logic is sound, but it raises an uncomfortable question. If the practical requirements of NEOM's location pointed toward industrial use, why was a residential megacity ever proposed? The answer lies in the nature of the original vision. The line was never designed by engineers working backward from practical constraints. It was designed by visionaries working forward from aesthetic ambitions. The specifications came from Crown Prince MBS himself, based on what would look impressive, not what would work. 170 kilometers, because it sounded revolutionary. 500 meters tall, because it would rival the world's tallest buildings. 200 meters wide, because it would create a dramatic canyon effect. 9 million residents, because it would be the largest planned city in history. Nobody asked whether the location was suitable for residential development at this scale. Nobody asked whether the engineering was possible. Nobody asked whether the economics made sense. Now, 5 years and $50 billion later, the project was being redesigned around what the location could actually support. Not a city for millions, but facilities for machines. The decision to transform the line wasn't ideological, it was mathematical. By January 2026, Saudi Arabia faced a cascade of financial pressures that made the original Neom vision untenable. Oil prices collapsed. When Vision 2030 was announced in 2016, oil traded near triple digits. The assumption was that sustained high prices would fund the kingdom's transformation. By late 2025, Brent crude had fallen to approximately $60 per barrel. Bloomberg Economics calculated that Saudi Arabia needed oil at $96 per barrel just to balance its regular budget, and $113 per barrel to fund MBS. At $60, the kingdom was running a significant deficit. Competing commitments emerged. Saudi Arabia had won bids to host the 2030 World Expo in Riyadh and the 2034 FIFA World Cup. Both events require tens of billions in infrastructure investment. Both have fixed deadlines that cannot slip. Both provide immediate international prestige that the line's uncertain completion date could not match. The sunk cost became undeniable. $50 billion had been spent on Neom. What did it purchase? Approximately 2.4 kilometers of foundation work, 6,000 piles driven into desert sand, excavation for modules that might never be built, support facilities for workers who would soon be sent home. $50 billion. 2.4 kilometers. That's approximately $20 billion per kilometer of incomplete foundation. No vertical construction. No residents. No revenue. The Public Investment Fund, which owns an EOM and manages nearly $1 trillion in Saudi assets, wrote down $8 billion in August 2025. The write-down acknowledged what internal calculations had shown for months. Neom's original scope would never be realized. Foreign investment failed to materialize. The kingdom had hoped international investors would fund significant portions of Neom. They didn't. Human rights concerns, engineering, skepticism, and the project's uncertain governance kept foreign capital away. Saudi Arabia was funding NEOM almost entirely from its own sovereign wealth. Something had to give. The strategic review concluded that something was the line itself. The futuristic city would be sacrificed to preserve what could be salvaged. Infrastructure that could support industrial use, even if residential dreams had to die. The pivot to data centers raises an immediate question. What happens to the infrastructure already built? $50 billion purchased significant physical assets, even if they fall far short of the original vision. Foundation systems, 6,000 piles have been driven into the ground, some reaching depths of 30 meters. These foundations were designed to support 500-meter tall structures. They are dramatically over-engineered for data center buildings, which typically rise only a few stories. But over-engineered foundations are still usable foundations. Excavation and earthworks. Massive trenches have been cut along portions of the line's planned route. Earth has been moved, graded, and prepared for construction. This work can support data center construction, though much of it extends beyond what data centers would require. Support infrastructure, roads, worker housing, utilities, and logistics facilities have been built to support construction. These can continue serving construction of data centers or other industrial facilities. Coastal access. The western end of the line, near the Red Sea, includes infrastructure for water intake and outflow. Originally designed for desalination to supply a city of millions, this infrastructure could support the seawater cooling systems that data centers require. The strategic review reportedly concluded that NEOM should repurpose infrastructure already built rather than extend construction deeper into the desert. This suggests a pragmatic acknowledgement. The money spent cannot be recovered, but some value can be extracted by building something, even if that something bears no resemblance to the original vision. Data centers are not glamorous. They do not attract tourists or generate viral social media content. They do not demonstrate civilizational revolution or redefine human existence. But they generate revenue. They support growing industries. They create jobs, albeit far fewer than a city of 9 million would require. They provide a return on investment, however modest, compared to 50 billion in sunk costs. The most expensive server farm in human history will rise from the ruins of the most ambitious city ever proposed. It's a fitting epitaph for a project that always valued practicality last. The line's pivot triggered consequences across the entire NEOM ecosystem. Just days before the Financial Times reported on the data center strategy, Saudi Arabia announced the indefinite postponement of the 2029 Asian Winter Games. The games were scheduled to be held at Trigina, NEOM's planned mountain ski resort. Trigina was supposed to demonstrate that Saudi Arabia could host winter sports in the desert. The resort, designed by firms including Zaha Hadid Architects, would feature year-round skiing on a combination of natural snow, artificial snow, and synthetic slopes. It would include luxury hotels, residential towers, and entertainment facilities. Now Trigina is being downsized. The Architects Journal reported that the ski village would be scaled back significantly. Zaha Hadid's proposed tower and other high-profile designs face uncertain futures. The kingdom will host standalone winter sports events, instead of the comprehensive Asian Games it had promised. The Olympic Council of Asia announced that South Korea and China had offered to step in as potential replacement hosts. The same games that were supposed to showcase Saudi Arabia's transformation might instead highlight its retreat. Other NEOM components face similar pressures. Oxagon, the floating industrial port, has seen construction delays. Work barely began by mid-2025, and the desalination plant that was supposed to supply the line has reportedly been quietly scrapped. Sindala, the luxury island resort, held an opening party in 2024 but remained closed to the public months later. Reports indicate the project ran triple its budget and years behind schedule. The workforce is shrinking. NEOM aimed to cut its headcount to 1/3 of peak levels, relocating over 1,000 employees to Riyadh for oversight. The construction workforce of 140,000 would be dramatically reduced as projects scaled back. The vision of NEO as an integrated ecosystem of futuristic developments is dissolving. What remains is a collection of troubled projects, each being individually assessed for what can be salvaged. Let us be clear about what has been lost. The line was not merely a construction project. It was a statement about human possibility. It proposed that technology, money, and will could transcend the limitations that have constrained urban development throughout history. No cars, no streets, no pollution, no inequality of access. Every service within 5 minutes, walk. Every resident connected to an AI system that would anticipate their needs. A city designed from scratch, unburdened by the compromises of organic urban growth. The vision was always criticized. Engineers called it impossible. Urban planners called it inhuman. Human rights advocates called it dystopian. Environmentalists warned of ecological catastrophe. But the vision was also seductive. It offered an alternative to the sprawling, polluted, traffic-choked cities that house most of humanity. It suggested that if we started fresh, with unlimited resources and uncompromising ambition, we could build something better. That suggestion has now been withdrawn. The line will not demonstrate a new model for urban living. It will not prove that car-free cities can work at scale. It will not showcase the integration of AI into daily life. It will not provide data on whether mirrored walls can coexist with bird migration routes, or whether 265,000 people per square kilometer can maintain mental health. These questions will remain unanswered because the line will never be built to answer them. What will be built instead is infrastructure. Useful, practical, unromantic infrastructure. Data centers that look like data centers look everywhere. Low-rise, buildings filled with servers, surrounded by cooling equipment, connected by fiber optic cables to the global internet. The kingdom that promised to revolutionize civilization will instead contribute to the global supply of computing power. It's not nothing, but it's not what was promised. The renderings of the mirrored city will join the archive of unrealized visions. Paolo Salarius Arcasanti expanded to urban scale at Buckminster Fuller's floating cities. Frank Lloyd Wright's Mile High Tower. Beautiful images of futures that never arrived. The Line S renders will be particularly poignant because they were created with the full backing of a nation-state and $500 billion in committed funding. If this vision couldn't be realized, what urban utopia ever can be? The Line S transformation from city to server farm illuminates larger questions about Saudi Arabia's entire modernization strategy. Vision 2030, announced in 2016, aimed to diversify the kingdom's economy away from oil dependence. The strategy included sovereign wealth fund investments, tourism development, entertainment, liberalization, and mega projects like NEOM. The theory was straightforward. Use oil wealth to build non-oil industries before oil wealth runs out. Transform Saudi Arabia from a petrostate into a diversified economy that can thrive regardless of energy market fluctuations. The line was supposed to be the crown jewel of this transformation. A city so advanced, so attractive, so revolutionary that it would draw millions of residents and position Saudi Arabia as a global leader in urban innovation. The pivot to data centers doesn't abandon Vision 2030, but it fundamentally instead of revolutionary urban development, the kingdom will pursue industrial infrastructure. Instead of attracting millions of new residents, it will attract server racks. Instead of demonstrating a new model for human civilization, it will participate in existing industries. This is not failure in the conventional sense. Data centers are part of the future economy. AI infrastructure is strategically valuable. Positioning Saudi Arabia as a technology hub has met, but it is a retreat from the ambition that defined the original vision. It is an acknowledgement that Saudi Arabia will not lead a civilizational revolution, but will instead participate in one led by others. It is a recognition that unlimited money cannot buy unlimited possibility. The implications extend beyond NEOM. If the line cannot be built as promised, what other Vision 2030 projects face similar constraints? If engineering reality defeated the line, what other visions will it defeat? The kingdom's defenders will argue that adaptation is wisdom, that recognizing limits is mature, that pivoting to viable projects demonstrates pragmatism over pride. The kingdom's critics will argue that the original promises were always fantasy, that $50 billion was wasted on ego, that the pivot proves what skeptics said from the beginning. Both arguments contain truth. The pivot is both pragmatic and an admission of failure. It is both wise adaptation and evidence of original folly. What cannot be argued is that the vision sold to the world in 2021 will be delivered. It will not. The desert around NEOM stretches empty to the horizon, as it always has. The foundation piles stand in rows, awaiting structures that may never rise. The excavation trenches cut through ancient sand, prepared for a city that will not exist. The worker camps house laborers, who will soon scatter to other projects, other countries, other dreams. Somewhere in those camps, or in TR-conditioned offices of Riyadh, or in the boardrooms of international consulting firms, people are making decisions about what comes next. Data center specifications are being drafted. Cooling system requirements are being calculated. Server rack layouts are being optimized. The work of building will continue, just not the building that was promised. This transformation raises a question that extends far beyond Saudi Arabia, far beyond NEOM, far beyond any single megaproject. The question is this: in an age of unprecedented technological capability and accumulated wealth, why can't we build the cities we imagine? We can render them beautifully. We can describe them compellingly. We can fund them lavishly. We can announce them confidently, but we cannot build them. The line is not the first utopian city to fail. It joins a long procession of unrealized visions, stretching back centuries. From ideal Renaissance cities that remained drawings to 20th century master plans that produced only fragments, the gap between urban imagination and urban reality has never closed. Perhaps the gap is inherent. Perhaps cities cannot be designed. They can only evolve. Perhaps the complexity of human settlement exceeds the capacity of human planning. Perhaps the dream of the perfect city is itself the problem, a dream that blinds us to the messier, slower, more organic processes through which actual cities improve. Or perhaps we simply haven't yet developed the wisdom to match our ambition. Perhaps future generations will build what we can only imagine, learning from our failures what we could not learn from our dreams. The line's transformation offers no definitive answer. It offers only evidence. Evidence that $50 billion was not enough, that 5 years was not enough, that the full commitment of a wealthy nation was not enough to build what one man imagined when he drew a line across a map. The servers will hum in the desert, processing data, generating heat, consuming power. They will not house 9 million people. They will not demonstrate a new model for civilization. They will not answer the question of whether a better urban future is possible. They will simply work, as machines do, performing the tasks they were designed to perform, and the vision of the line, the mirrored city, stretching to the horizon, will exist only where it has always truly existed. In renderings and presentations, in promises and press releases, in the imagination of those who believed that wanting something badly enough could make it real. The desert has seen empires rise and fall. It has watched civilizations flourish and disappear. It has witnessed countless human ambitions dissolve into sand. It will witness this one too, and then it will wait, patient and eternal, for the next dreamer to draw a line across its face.